Well, hello, boys and girls, and welcome back to Library Class at Home with Mr. S. We have been reading this exciting book right here, The Mouse and the Motorcycle, written by Beverly Cleary, and oh boy, did we leave off in a tough spot. It seems that the boy, Keith, is very, very sick. His parents don't know what to do, hotel management doesn't know what to do, and there's no way to get a doctor or medicine to him in time. But Ralph thinks he knows what he can do. He thinks there must be an aspirin somewhere in that hotel, and he's going to find it. So let's pick up on Chapter 11. Chapter 11 is called The Search. "I have to go out into the hotel," Ralph informed his relatives. "I've got to help the boy." "Oh no, not out into the hotel," said Ralph's mother. "Not while the housekeeper is looking for mice. If you're seen, we'll all be in danger." "I will be back before dawn," said Ralph very staunchly. "I must go. Don't try to stop me." "See here, my boy, aren't you being a little dramatic?" said Uncle Lester. "Whatever do you have to go out into that hotel for?" "I have to find an aspirin pill," said Ralph. "An aspirin tablet." His answer was dramatic enough even for Uncle Lester. His entire family stared at him in disbelief. Not an aspirin. Not after his own father had been poisoned by one of those dreadful tablets. "An aspirin?" Ralph's mother gasped. "No, Ralph, not that. Anything but that." "It's the only way." Ralph stood tall and brave. "The boy has a fever and he needs that aspirin. I'm going to find him one." "Oh, Ralph!" His mother hid her face in her paws. "But Ralph," quivered Aunt Sissy, "remember your father. You can't carry an aspirin in your cheek pouches. It would poison you. How could you get one here?" "I will find a way." Ralph was outwardly steadfast in his determination, but inside he wondered how he would manage to get an aspirin into room 215 if he did find one. He guessed he could roll it. "Ralph, stay here," pleaded his mother. "You're too young. Let Uncle Lester go." "Well now, let's talk this over," said Uncle Lester. "I'm not too young, and I haven't a moment to lose." Ralph, who was really frightened by what he was about to do, also enjoyed the drama of the moment. "Goodbye. I shall return before dawn." "Ralph, promise me you'll be careful," pleaded his mother. "Promise me you won't climb into a suitcase like your Aunt Adrienne." Ralph's Aunt Adrienne, like your Aunt Adrienne. Ralph's Aunt Adrienne, who liked nice things, had climbed into a suitcase to examine a nylon stocking. Someone had closed the suitcase, and Aunt Adrienne had never been seen again. I don't know why it's so hard to read that word on this page, boys and girls. Sometimes when I read, I get a little caught up in it, and Adrian, right. And his Aunt Adrienne had never been seen again. It was hoped that she had been carried away to a life of luxury. "Promise me, Ralph," said his mother, but her son was already on his way out of the knothole. Ralph scurried across the carpet of room 215, flattened himself, and squeezed underneath the door. Once out in the hall, his courage ebbed away. The aspirin tablet seemed a very small thing to find in such a very big place. It would be much easier to find the motorcycle. No, Ralph thought, I mustn't think about that motorcycle right now. Ralph began to feel pretty small himself, much smaller than he had felt during his show of bravery back in the mouse nest. Down in the lobby, a clock struck 1 o'clock. There was not a moment to lose. He ran to the next room and squeezed under the door and searched under the beds and the dresser while the two guests slept soundlessly. All he found was a bobby pin. He skipped room 211 because his enemy, the little dog, was still in there, and ran on to room 209. A hurried search, frightening because of the loud and uneven snores that came from one of the beds, revealed nothing but a few pretzel crumbs, which Ralph did not have time to stop and eat. On and on Ralph ran, down the hall, under doors, around beds and dressers. There was not a single aspirin tablet to be found. In one of the rooms, he did see a penny that had rolled under a luggage rack and remembered his mother's wish to leave a tip for room service. But tonight he had no time for pennies. He must press on and find an aspirin. A small doubt began to creep into Ralph's thoughts as he ran down the hall to the last room on the second floor. Maybe there was no aspirin on the second floor. Maybe he was risking his life and the lives of his family for nothing. But Ralph pushed the thought aside. He would not let himself become discouraged. If there was no aspirin on the second floor, there had to be one someplace on the ground floor. Tonight he was willing to brave the stairs to find it. He flattened himself and squeezed under the last door on the second floor. There was nothing under either of the beds but the things Keith called dust mice. There was no sound but the rattle of the windows in the wind. Ralph stared across the carpet toward the dresser, when suddenly a light from the bedside table blinded him. He stopped, rooted to the carpet by fear, even though it was not likely that anyone was going to cut off his tail with a carving knife. He heard someone slip out of bed and utter a sound halfway between a squeal and a scream. Before Ralph knew what was happening, an ordinary drinking glass had been clapped down over him. There he stood in the glass trap. But by then his eyes were adjusted to the light, and he found himself facing a pair of bare feet. Looking up, he saw that the feet belonged to a young woman in a pink nightgown. "Mary Lou, wake up," she whispered to the young woman in the other bed. "Look what I've caught." "Huh?" Mary Lou blinked, and raising up on one elbow, she looked. Her hair was done up on pink rollers. "Betty, are you out of your mind? It must be past 1 o'clock in the morning." The night was slipping by much too quickly for the trapped mouse. He was terrified and he was desperate. No one in his family had ever been trapped under a drinking glass before. Worst of all, he was failing Keith and endangering his family. "Wake up, Mary Lou, and look," insisted Betty. "I was getting up to stop the rattle in the window, and I caught a mouse." The news roused Mary Lou from bed, and the two young women knelt on the carpet to look at Ralph, who promptly turned his back. He did not care to be stared at in his misery. But it was no use. The women moved around to the other side of the glass. "Oh, isn't he darling?" said Betty. "Just look at his little paws." Mary Lou leaned in closer for a better look. "And his little ears, aren't they sweet?" Betty was delighted. It was disgusting. It was bad enough to be trapped and stared at, but to have this pair carrying on in such a gussy fashion, it was almost more than Ralph could stomach. Cunning little paws indeed. They were strong paws, paws for grasping the hand grips of a motorcycle. "Oh, Betty, do you suppose we could take him back to Wichita with us? My 3rd grade would love him." "So would my kindergarten," said Betty. "We could keep him in a cage on the ledge, and all the children could bring him food from home. It would be such a good experience for them to have a pet in the classroom." "Oh, so it looks like these two are teachers. Betty's a kindergarten teacher, just like me. But I don't have any mice in my library." "Well," thought Ralph grimly, "I've always wanted to travel." A cage in a kindergarten in Wichita, however, was not exactly the destination he had in mind. The minutes were slipping by dangerously. Oh boy. Dangerously fast. He had to do something. "Look," he shouted through the glass in desperation. "Let me go! Please let me go! There's something terribly important I've got to do!" "He squeaked," marveled Betty. "Oh, he's adorable," said Mary Lou. It was no use. The young women could not speak his language. Ralph was in despair. He thought of Keith tossing feverishly in his bed, and of his family huddled in the mouse nest, waiting for his safe return. "But I don't see how we could take him back to Wichita," said Betty sensibly. "We're driving to San Francisco and then to Disneyland before we start back. How could we carry him thousands of miles?" The two teachers looked thoughtfully at Ralph, who knew his fate depended on their decision. Was he to be carried to Disneyland and eventually to a ledge in a kindergarten room in Wichita, or would they let him go? A third possibility crossed Ralph's mind. Perhaps they would leave him under the glass for the housekeeper to see. He hoped not. He did not think he could last that long. Already the inside of the glass was beginning to feel a little warm and airless. "I suppose we really shouldn't turn him loose in the hotel," said Mary Lou. "Mice are pests, even if they're cute." The teacher not only destroyed Ralph's hopes, she hurt his feelings as well, calling him a pest when he was out on an errand of mercy. From the mouse's point of view, the teachers were the pests. "I know," said Betty suddenly, causing Ralph to look over his shoulder for a clue to what it was she knew. "I know how we can get rid of him without hurting him." The young teacher reached over to the bedside table, where she picked up a picture postcard. She slid it carefully under the glass and under Ralph's feet, so now he was standing on the postcard. He noticed the picture was of a giant redwood tree, the same postcard all travelers bought when they came to California. "Now what are you going to do?" said Mary Lou. "Watch." Betty carefully lifted the postcard and Ralph and the glass and walked across the room. Even though he knew it was useless, Ralph scrabbled around in his tiny prison. He was afraid she was taking him toward the wash basin. He had heard of mice being drowned by people who did not like traps. But the teacher walked not to the wash basin. Instead, she opened the window. She held Ralph across the sill and removed the postcard from the glass. Then she gave it a little toss and shook Ralph off onto the vines that grew up on the side of the building. "There," she said, and closed the window, leaving Ralph clinging to a vine high above the ground. Oh my goodness, boys and girls, that is the end of chapter 11. Poor Ralph! He got caught by two well-meaning teachers, and they didn't want to hurt him, so they opened a window and tossed him outside. Luckily, he managed to grab onto the vine. How is he going to get back inside, and how is he going to find the aspirin? What do you guys think? How could he get back into the room? Give me your thoughts. Let me know how you think he can manage to get back into the hotel. Leave me a comment down in the comment section on my Google Classroom page. And remember to click the turned in button when you guys are done so they know that you've seen the story. Don't forget to check back tomorrow. We're going to read... Oh, wait. It's Friday, isn't it? Don't forget to check back on Monday, where we will read the exciting conclusion of The Mouse and Motorcycle, and we're going to find out what happens. So everybody have a great weekend, guys. Stay safe. Don't forget to keep washing your hands and help out around the house. I hope you've enjoyed this week's installments, and we're going to finish this book next week. Everybody have a great weekend, and I'll see you guys Monday.
Spaghetti.
That's my warm-up. I always do a little bit of a warm-up before I read. It clears the nasal passages and gets the voice ready. Okay. All right, let me know when.